Miss S.
The man who destroyed my career walked into my bakery on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m., and for 3 full seconds, neither of us could speak. I recognized him immediately. You don't forget the face of the man who fired you. You don't forget the voice that said, "Your position has been terminated, effective immediately," while security packed your knives into a box and escorted you from the building you had given 4 years of your life to. You don't forget the dark eyes that looked at you across a mahogany desk and decided, based on a lie he didn't know was a lie, that you were a thief. Don Luca Faro, head of the Faro family. Owner of Palazzo Nero, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The man who had hired me as his head pastry chef because my croissants made him close his eyes, and who had fired me 2 years later because someone convinced him that the hands making those croissants were also stealing from his kitchen. He was standing in my bakery. My bakery. The one I had built from a condemned building with my last 3,000 euros and my 2 bare hands. And his face, his controlled, beautiful, powerful face, was wearing an expression I had never seen on it before. He looked like a man standing in front of a mistake he couldn't undo. But let me take you back. Because you need to understand what I lost before you can understand what I built, and you need to understand what was built before you can understand what it meant when he walked through that door. My name is Margot Beaulieu. I'm 32 years old. I am plus-size, wide hips, full curves, thick arms, a round face with deep brown skin that my grandmère said was the color of the first caramel before it darkens. I'm also the most talented pastry chef most people have never heard of, because the man who should have made me famous fired me before the world could taste what I can do. I grew up in the kitchen. My grandmère, Celeste Beaulieu, was a baker in Lyon. Not a famous one, not a decorated one, but the kind whose croissants drew a line around the block every Saturday morning, and whose tarte tatin made grown men weep. She taught me everything, not from recipes, from hands. Her hands on mine, guiding the fold of the laminated dough, teaching me the exact pressure that turns butter and flour into architecture. Baking is not cooking, she told me. When I was 9, standing on a stool beside her. Cooking is forgiveness. You can fix a sauce, adjust a seasoning. Baking is commitment. Once the dough is in the oven, you have already decided what it will become. So you must decide well. I decided well. I went to culinary school in Paris. I graduated first in my pastry cohort. I staged at 2 Michelin-starred restaurants before I was 25. And at 28, I was hired as the head pastry chef at Palazzo Nero, the crown jewel of the Faro family's legitimate empire, a restaurant so exclusive that the waiting list was measured in months, and the clientele included heads of state, celebrities, and the kind of people whose last names are whispered rather than spoken. The man who hired me was Don Luca Faro. I didn't know he was a Don, not at first. The restaurant's corporate structure was layered, holding companies, a managing director, a veneer of legitimate luxury hospitality. I knew Palazzo Nero had a particular clientele. I knew the private dining room was used for meetings that the front-of-house staff didn't discuss. I knew that the owner was a man named Luca Faro who visited the kitchen once a week, tasted every dish, and spoke to the staff with the quiet, absolute authority of a man who had never needed to raise his voice because the world had been listening to him since birth. What I knew for certain was this. On my first day, I made him a batch of croissants, plain croissants, butter, flour, thyme, technique. Nothing elaborate, just the foundation. He took one bite, closed his eyes, and didn't open them for 4 seconds. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. "My grandmère," I said. "Your grandmère," he said. Understood something about butter that most pastry chefs spend their entire careers failing to learn. He opened his eyes, dark eyes, focused, assessing, the eyes of a man who evaluates everything and everyone with the specific, calculating attention of someone for whom quality is a moral position. "You're hired."
"I'll double the salary," the agency quoted. He doubled the salary because my croissants were worth it. I need you to hear me say that, because what came later will try to make you forget I was worth every cent. I was brilliant. My pastry program at Palazzo Nero was extraordinary. I created desserts that food critics called transcendent, that the Michelin inspector noted specifically in the review that earned the restaurant its 3rd star. My chocolate soufflé was featured in 3 international food magazines. My tarte aux fruits was so beautiful that a guest once asked to have it framed instead of eaten.
For 4 years, I was the heartbeat of that kitchen. And then someone stopped my heart. Renaud Villon was the sous chef. Thin, precise, French in the way that makes other French people uncomfortable, the kind of chef who believed that the kitchen was a meritocracy of aesthetics, and that a plus-size woman with flour on her arms and her grandmare's techniques could not possibly deserve the position he had spent 6 years failing to earn. He was talented, I'll give him that. His technique was flawless, his plating was geometric, his palate was precise, but he lacked the thing that separates a good pastry chef from a great one: warmth. His desserts were beautiful and cold. Mine were beautiful and alive. The difference was my grandmare's hands in my memory, guiding every fold, every layer, every decision made before the dough enters the oven. Renaud hated me. Not loudly, precisely. He undermined me in the ways that are impossible to prove and devastating to experience. He lost my mise en place. He accidentally adjusted oven temperatures. He whispered to the line cooks that my portions were generous because she doesn't know when to stop eating, so she doesn't know when to stop serving. He called me the big girl behind my back and chef to my face, and the distance between those two names was the distance between a man's public performance and his private cruelty. But what Renaud did that ended my career was not whispered, it was engineered. Over 3 months, Renaud systematically fabricated evidence that I was stealing from the kitchen. He created false invoices for premium ingredients, Valrhona chocolate, Normandy butter, Tahitian vanilla in quantities that exceeded what my pastry program used. He routed the invoices through a supplier account he had set up in my name. He planted receipts in my locker. He built a paper trail so meticulous, so detailed, so architecturally precise that when he brought it to Don Luca Ferro's attention, it looked exactly like what it was designed to look like, a plus-size pastry chef skimming ingredients for personal profit. The meeting lasted 4 minutes.
Chef Beaulieu.
Luca Ferro's voice was controlled, clinical, and absolutely devoid of the warmth I had heard when he tasted my croissants. We have evidence of systematic invoice fraud connected to your station. The discrepancy amounts to approximately 47,000 euros over 3 months. That's impossible, I said. I have never. The invoices bear your supplier code. The receipts were found in your personal effects. The pattern is consistent and documented. He placed the manila folder on the desk. Your position is terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises. Your final paycheck will be deposited minus the documented discrepancy. Luca, Don Ferro, I did not steal from this kitchen. Someone has fabricated. The evidence has been reviewed by my financial team. The matter is closed. He didn't look at me. He looked at the folder, at the numbers, at the lie disguised as mathematics. Please collect your belongings. I left Palazzo Nero with a box of knives and 4 years of my life reduced to a termination notice. I didn't cry in the restaurant. I cried in my car, in the parking structure, for 47 minutes. 1 minute for every 1,000 euros I had been accused of stealing. Renaud Villain was promoted to head pastry chef the following week. I need you to understand the completeness of the destruction because she lost her job doesn't cover it. In the restaurant world, the high-end Michelin-starred reputation is currency world. Being fired for theft is a professional death sentence. Word travels through kitchens the way fire travels through grease, fast, hot, and impossible to outrun. Within a week, every head chef, every restaurant manager, every culinary recruiter in the city knew that Margot Beaulieu had been terminated from Palazzo Nero for stealing. No one called to hear my side. No one investigated. The Ferro name carried a weight that crushed nuance if Don Luca Ferro said, "You stole? You stole?" And the industry adjusted its Rolodex accordingly. I lost the apartment. I couldn't make rent without a salary. I lost my savings, 4 years of careful saving, drained by the cost of the apartment deposit I'd never recover, and the legal consultation I couldn't afford to continue. I lost my reputation. The thing that had taken 15 years to build, from the first croissant in my grandmare's kitchen to the 3rd Michelin star that my desserts had helped earn. I moved into a studio above a laundromat. I applied for work at every kitchen, bakery, and cafe that would read my CV. None of them would. The Beaulieu name, which once meant her tart Tate-Taten will make you cry, now meant the plus-size chef who stole from the Ferro family. I was 30 years old, plus-size, broke, disgraced, and living above a laundromat with a box of knives I couldn't use and a photograph of my grandmare that I propped on the windowsill so I could see her face when I woke up. Baking is commitment, Grandmère Celeste had said. Once the dough is in the oven, you have already decided what it will become. I was the dough, and someone had decided I would become nothing. I decided differently. I had 3,214 euros, my entire net worth. the sum total of what remained after 15 years of professional baking, 4 years at the best restaurant in the city, and a lie that had cost me everything. The building was on Rue des Oubliés, Street of the Forgotten. I'm not making that up. The street was named during the Revolution for the families who were relocated there and then never mentioned again. 200 years later, the name still fit. It was a narrow lane in a neighborhood that guidebooks didn't list and delivery drivers avoided and real estate agents described as transitional, which is a polite word for abandoned. The shop front had been empty for 7 years. Previous tenant, a cobbler who had retired. The windows were boarded. The floor was cracked. The oven, a beautiful, ancient wood-fired stone oven built into the back wall, was buried under 7 years of dust and one family of pigeons. The asking price was €3,000. I know. Even for a condemned building on the Street of the Forgotten, €3,000 was a number that reflected the seller's desire to simply stop paying property tax on it. I bought it, every cent I had. I signed the papers with flour-stained hands, because I had been baking in the laundromat's kitchen at midnight, using the industrial oven to practice, because a baker who doesn't bake is a body without a pulse, and I walked into my condemned building and stood in the center of the cracked floor and cried. Then I stopped crying, and I started cleaning. I cleaned for 3 weeks. I repaired the floor myself. YouTube tutorials, borrowed tools, and the specific stubborn determination of a woman who has been told she is nothing and has decided to become everything. I restored the stone oven. It took 11 days of scrubbing, remortaring, and 2 consultations with a retired mason who charged me in croissants. I built the counter from reclaimed wood. I painted the walls the color of warm cream. I hung a sign I had painted myself. Beaulieu's my name, my grandmare's name, the name that Palazzo Nero had tried to make synonymous with theft, reclaimed in gold paint on a hand-cut wooden board. I opened on a Thursday in October. My menu was 7 items: croissants, pain au chocolat, tarte to tatin, a seasonal fruit tart, sourdough bread, brioche, and a single cake. My grandmare's gâteau invisible, a French apple cake so delicate that the layers of apple disappear into the batter, which is why they call it invisible. It was my grandmare's signature. It was the first thing she taught me. It was the cake I made when I needed to remember who I was. 2 years later. Beaulieu's is the best bakery in the city. I don't say that with arrogance. I say it with the quiet, factual certainty of a woman who wakes at 3:30 a.m., fires the stone oven by 4, and has the first croissants ready by 6. Croissants that a food blogger called the closest any human hand has come to perfection, and that a retired Michelin inspector who wandered in by accident tasted with closed eyes and said, "Whoever trained you was a genius." I said, "My grandmare," he said, "give her my compliments." I said, "I will," and I looked at the photograph of Celeste on the wall behind the counter, and I meant it. The queue starts at 5:45 a.m. By 8, the croissants are gone. By noon, everything is gone. I bake what I bake. I sell what I sell, and when it's gone, it's gone. There is no expansion plan, there is no franchise model, there is no investor. Beaulieu's is one woman, one oven, one street, and the hands my grandmare trained. The neighborhood changed around me, not because of gentrification, because of bread. Beaulieu's drew people to Rue des Oubliés, and people drew other businesses, and within 18 months the Street of the Forgotten had a florist, a wine bar, a bookshop, and a waiting list for apartment leases. The mayor's office sent me a letter commending the revitalization of a historic quarter. I framed it and hung it next to Grandmère Celeste. I was not famous. I did not want to be famous. I wanted to bake, and I wanted to do it in a place that belonged to me, where no one could fire me, where no one could fabricate invoices or plant receipts or call me the big girl behind my back, where the only verdict that mattered was the verdict of the dough. Did you commit? Did you decide well? Was the fold precise? Was the butter cold? Was the heat right? The dough said yes every morning, yes. Tuesday, 6:47 a.m. I was pulling the second batch of croissants from the oven, the batch that has the deepest color because the stone oven's sweet spot is the back left corner where the heat is most consistent. When the bell above the door chimed, I turned tray in hand, professional smile ready, and the world folded in half. Luca Ferro standing in my doorway. Alone. No security, no consigliere, no entourage, just a man in a dark coat standing in a bakery on the Street of the Forgotten, looking at the plus-size woman he had fired 2 years ago with an expression that I had never seen on his face in 4 years of working for him. He looked lost. Don Luca Ferro, the man who controlled half the city's operations, whose name was spoken in the specific reverent whisper reserved for natural disasters and heads of state, looked like a man who had walked into a room and discovered that everything he believed about it was wrong. "Margot," he said. I set the tray down. I set it down carefully because my hands wanted to throw it, and I am not a woman who throws things. I am a woman who commits, who decides, who places the dough in the oven with precision and lets the heat do the rest. "The bakery is open," I said. My voice was steady. My voice was the steadiest thing in the room. "If you're here for croissants, they're €8 a pair. If you're here for anything else, the door you came in through works in both directions." "I'm here," he said, and his voice cracked the voice of a dawn, the voice that commanded rooms, the voice that had said your position is terminated without a single tremor, because I was wrong, he told me. Standing in my bakery at 6:47 a.m., with the smell of my croissants in the air and the ghost of my grandmère watching from her photograph on the wall, he told me what he had found. 6 months ago, Renaud Villon had been caught. Not by Luca, by the restaurant's new financial controller, a woman named Elise who had been hired to audit Palazzo Nero's accounts as part of a routine compliance review. Elise was thorough. Elise was precise. Elise was the kind of forensic accountant who notices when a decimal point is in the wrong place and does not rest until she understands why. Elise found the discrepancy, not my discrepancy, Renaud's, the same pattern of false invoices, the same inflated ingredient orders, the same supplier account, except this time the trail led back to its actual creator. Renaud had been stealing from Palazzo Nero for 5 years. 5 years. He had begun before I arrived, had continued throughout my tenure, and had used my firing as both cover and opportunity, framing me for his crimes and then, with me gone, expanding his operation under the cover of a promotion he had engineered by destroying the woman who stood in his way. The total theft, €211,000. Not 47,000, 211. Renaud had been siphoning ingredients, inflating invoices, and pocketing the difference for half a decade, and the only reason he had been caught was that he had gotten greedy after I left, because the only person in that kitchen with eyes sharp enough to notice his manipulations was the plus-size pastry chef he had framed and fired. Luca looked at the evidence. He looked at the dates. He looked at the supplier account that Renaud had created in my name, an account I had never opened, never accessed, never known existed, and he understood with the specific, devastating clarity of a man who prides himself on never making mistakes that he had made the worst mistake of his life. He fired Renaud. He had him removed from the premises the same way I had been removed. Security, a box, an escort to the door. Then he did something else, something that went beyond professional termination into the specific shadow territory of a Don who has been personally deceived. I do not know the details of what happened to Renaud Villon after he left Palazzo Nero. I do not ask. That is not my area. What I know is that Renaud's name no longer appears in any restaurant staff list, any culinary directory, or any industry database anywhere. He has been erased from the profession with the thoroughness of a man whose family has been erasing inconvenient people for generations. And then Luca Ferro spent 6 months looking for me. "I spent 6 months looking for you," he said. "You vanished. You left no forwarding address. You didn't update your professional listings. The agency had no record. Your phone was disconnected. I hired 3 investigators, and the third one found you 4 days ago. Here, on the Rue des Oubliés, in a bakery you built yourself." "Why?" I asked. "Not why did you look for me. I understood that. Why did you believe him? Why did you believe the numbers without asking me?" 4 years, Luca. 4 years of croissants and soufflés and tarte tatin and the 3rd Michelin star that my desserts helped earn. 4 years, and you gave me 4 minutes. He didn't defend himself. I want you to know that because it matters. Don Luca Ferro, a man whose entire existence is built on control, composure, and the absolute certainty that his decisions are correct, did not defend himself. He did not explain. He did not rationalize. He did not say the evidence was compelling, or I had no reason to doubt, or any of the reasonable, logical, face-saving things that powerful men say when they are confronted with the consequences of their power. He said 3 words. I was wrong. The bakery went quiet. My ovens hummed. The croissants cooled. And the most powerful man in the city stood on the wrong side of my counter and said the 3 words that dons do not say, that men who command empires do not say, that the voice which had told me your position is terminated had never once in its life been required to form. I was wrong. I was wrong to fire you without investigation." He continued, and his voice was raw, stripped of its polish, the voice of a man speaking without his armor for perhaps the first time. "I was wrong to accept fabricated evidence. I was wrong to prioritize efficiency over justice. I was wrong to let a man's jealousy destroy a woman's career, because investigating would have taken longer than terminating. And I was wrong about you, Margot. I looked at numbers on a page and I forgot to look at the woman who made croissants that made me close my eyes. I forgot the hands, I judged the math and forgot the flour. I was shaking, my arms were crossed and my jaw was set and my voice was steady, but underneath all of it I was shaking because hearing those words from the man who had destroyed you is not relief. It is a second earthquake. The first one takes the ground away. The second one tells you the ground was never solid to begin with. What do you want? I asked. I want to make it right. How? My reputation is destroyed. The industry thinks I'm a thief. Every chef in the city will receive a personal communication from me. By the end of the week detailing Renaud Villon's fraud, your complete innocence and my personal apology for the error. The Palazzo Nero will issue a public statement. Your record will be expunged, your name will be restored. And that's enough for you? A press release? No. He reached into his coat and placed a document on the counter. This is a formal offer. Return to Palazzo Nero as executive pastry chef. Full creative control. Equity stake in the restaurant not as an employee but as a partner. 15% ownership vesting immediately. Back pay for 24 months deposited today. And a written apology signed by me that will be displayed in the restaurant's lobby for as long as the restaurant stands. I looked at the document. I looked at the numbers. The salary, the equity, the back pay. They were staggering. They were the kind of numbers that would have changed my life 2 years ago when I was living above a laundromat with 3,000 euros and a photograph of my grandmère. No, I said. The silence after no lasted 6 seconds. I counted. No, he repeated. No, I'm not coming back to Palazzo Nero. I placed my hand on the counter. My counter built from reclaimed wood with my own hands. I have a bakery. I built it from a condemned building. I restored the oven. I painted the walls. My name is on the door. My grandmare's photograph is on the wall. Every morning I wake at 3:30. I fire the stone oven and I bake things that make people close their eyes. I don't need your equity or your salary or your display case apology. I have everything I need. Then what can I offer you? And his voice, the Don's voice, the voice that commands, was genuinely asking. Not negotiating, asking. A man who has spent his entire life telling people what they will receive, asking a woman what she wants. 3 things, I said. First, the public statement. Not for me, for the next woman Renaud Villon's ghost tries to destroy. The industry needs to know that fabricated evidence destroys careers, and that the powerful man who believed it was wrong. Put your name on it. Let it cost you something. Done. Second, a standing order. Every Saturday, Palazzo Nero orders from Beaulieu's croissants, bread, and my grandmare's gâteau invisible, at market rate, not charity, commerce. You buy my product because it is the best, not because you owe me. The ghost of something appeared on his face. Your croissants were always the best. That was never the question. Third, I paused. This was the one that mattered. You eat one, right now. You stand in my bakery, and you taste what I built after you burned it down. You close your eyes the way you did on my first day, and you remember what you threw away. I placed a croissant on the counter. Golden, laminated, still warm from the stone oven's sweet spot. The exact same croissant I had made him 4 years ago, the one that had made him close his eyes and say, "Where did you learn this?" He picked it up. He took a bite. He closed his eyes. He didn't open them for 6 seconds. When he opened them, they were bright. The most feared man in the city, standing in a tiny bakery on the street of the forgotten, with croissant flakes on his dark coat and something in his dark eyes that he could no longer hide. "I didn't just fire my best chef," he said quietly. "I fired the best chef in the city, and she built something better than anything I've ever owned." "I know," I said. "That's why the answer is no." He started coming on Saturdays, for the order. That was the reason he gave, and that was the reason I permitted. The first Saturday, he sent a driver. I refused. The terms were clear. You buy from me, you come to the bakery. You don't send people. The second Saturday, he came himself. He stood at the counter, ordered the Saturday shipment for Palazzo Nero, 6 dozen croissants, 4 sourdough loaves, 2 gâteaux invisibles, and paid market rate. He did not linger. He did not attempt conversation. He bought the product, thanked me, and left. The third Saturday, he came early, before the shipment was ready. He asked if there was coffee. I made pour-over for myself every morning, and the pot was always generous because I am a plus-size woman who makes generous pots of everything. I poured him a cup. He sat at the tiny table by the window, the only seating in the bakery, a two-person table I had built from reclaimed wood because I believed a bakery should have one table for the person who needs to sit and breathe. He sat, he drank coffee, he read a newspaper, he didn't speak, he just existed in my space, with my permission. The fourth Saturday, he brought me a gift, a first edition of Escoffier's Le Guide Culinaire, the foundational text of French cuisine, published in 1903 in a leather binding that must have cost more than my building. "This is too much," I said. "It is exactly enough," he said. Open the inscription. Inside the front cover, in a handwriting I recognized from 4 years of reading his kitchen notes, he had written, "To Margot Beaulieu, whose hands understand what this book can only describe, with regret for the time we lost. Luca." I put the book on the shelf next to Grandmère Celeste's photograph. I did not thank him with words. I thanked him with a croissant, the best one from the best batch, the one from the back left corner of the stone oven, and he took a bite and closed his eyes, and the 6 seconds became 7. 1 year later. Beaulieu's is the most celebrated bakery in the city. The food critic from Le Monde called my croissants a religious experience that should require confession afterward. A famous chef, one of the ones who had refused to hire me after the firing, came to the bakery personally, ate a tarte tatin, and publicly apologized on his social media for believing a rumor over a recipe. The post went viral, 300,000 likes. I didn't respond. The tarte tatin had already said everything I needed to say. Palazzo Nero serves my pastries exclusively every Saturday, at market rate. The waitstaff tells the guests. The croissants are from Beaulieu's on Rue des Oubliettes. And the guests, heads of state, celebrities, the people whose names are whispered, send their drivers to the street of the forgotten on Monday morning, and the queue gets longer, and my ovens burn hotter, and my hands keep folding. Luca comes to the bakery every Saturday. Not as a customer anymore, though he still pays for his croissant, because I will not accept anything for free from the man who once took everything. He comes because the tiny table by the window has become his place. He reads, he drinks coffee, he watches me bake. And sometimes, when the bakery is empty and the ovens are cooling and the flour dust settles in the golden light like snow, he walks around the counter, my counter, built with my hands, and he stands behind me and he puts his arms around my waist and he says into my hair, "I was wrong." Every time, the same 3 words, not because I need to hear them. I heard them the first time, and the first time was enough, but because he needs to say them. Because Don Luca Ferro learned something in my bakery that his empire could never teach him. That the most powerful thing a powerful man can do is stand in a room he doesn't own and admit that the woman behind the counter was right all along. I'm 32 years old, I'm plus size. I own a bakery on the street of the forgotten. My grandmare's photograph watches me bake every morning. My hands fold the dough the way her hands taught mine, with commitment, with precision, with the understanding that once the dough is in the oven you have already decided what it will become. I decided to become this. Not the chef he fired, not the woman Renaud framed, not the name the industry erased. This, a plus-size woman in a flour-dusted apron, standing in a bakery she built from a condemned building with her last 3,000 euros, making croissants that make the most feared man in the city close his eyes. Grandmère Celeste was right. Baking is commitment, and I committed well. So here's your question. The man who fired you, who believed a lie, who chose efficiency over justice, who let a jealous man's fabrication end your career has found you. He stands in the bakery you built from nothing. He says 3 words no Don has ever said, "I was wrong." He offers you everything, your old position, equity, back pay, a public apology. Do you forgive him? Let him into the bakery, into the Saturdays, into the life you built without him knowing he broke you once and his world is built on shadows? Or never. Keep the bakery, keep the counter between you, keep the distance, because forgiveness is a door and some doors, once opened, let in things you can't control. I chose to sell him croissants. I chose to let him sit at the table by the window. I chose to let him stand in my bakery and remember what he threw away. But the counter stays between us until I decide otherwise, because this is my bakery, my name, my oven, and the only person who decides what comes out of it is me. drop your answer below. I read every single one, and if someone ever threw away your work, your talent, your name, and you built something from the wreckage that was better than anything they ever gave you, tell me about it. I want to hear your recipe.